The deafening roar of helicopter blades fills the air, slicing through the night as chaos unfolds below. Smoke rises from the distant horizon, a telltale sign of a battle far from over. Private William is crouched low, heart pounding in his chest, not from the threat of enemy fire, but from something much more dangerous. The weight of his secret presses against his ribcage, the knowledge that everything he's been hiding might be exposed tonight. His fingers tremble, not from the cold, but from the warmth of a hand gripping his with an intensity that feels like it could hold the world together, or shatter it completely. Beside him stands Officer Jason, his expression unreadable, eyes scanning the tree line for any signs of movement. They've been through countless missions together, fought side by side in a war that's never far from their minds. But tonight is different. Tonight the battlefield is no longer the only thing at risk. The bond between them, forged in the fire of their shared struggle, has grown stronger and more dangerous than either of them could have anticipated. The base is quiet tonight, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring, as if the silence itself has weight. Private William stands just outside the barracks, his eyes scanning the horizon. A sliver of moonlight cuts through the thin clouds, casting long shadows over the gravel paths. It's a desolate place, far from civilization, and yet somehow it feels like the world has forgotten about it. The air is thick with dust and sweat, the kind that settles into your lungs after weeks of being stuck in this remote outpost. This isn't where William thought he'd end up, not after the endless hours of training, the grueling tests, and the promises of a future that now seems so far away. But here he is, a soldier, and a soldier's life, he's learned, is never as clean-cut as it seems. He shoves his hands into the pockets of his fatigues, trying to ignore the knot in his stomach. It's been building for weeks, ever since he first noticed him. The officer, Jason. The one person who stands out in this army of faces, like a mountain amidst a flat plain. Jason's presence has a way of commanding the room. Without a word, he walks with purpose, his back always straight, his eyes always looking ahead, never lingering on anyone too long. He's the kind of man who makes you feel like he knows something you don't, and that something is always just out of reach. William never thought he'd feel anything for a fellow soldier, especially not an officer. They're supposed to be distant, detached, above the rest of the ranks. It's an unspoken rule that they stay removed from the emotions of the men they command, and yet, every time William sees Jason, his heart seems to betray him. It's like a secret rebellion within his chest, one he can't explain, one he can't ignore. Jason is everything William admires in a leader. Strong, disciplined, a rock in the chaos of war. His commands are sharp and clear, his decisions decisive, as if every move is calculated to protect the men under his command. He wears the weight of his rank with ease, his stoic face hiding a depth William can only guess at. But there's something else beneath that controlled exterior, something that pulls at William, though he can't place it. Something that tells him there's more to Jason than the officer persona he projects. Every moment spent near him feels like a test. William has learned to control his emotions, to keep them buried under the uniform, under the drill, under the mission. But Jason is different. There's a quiet intensity about him, an unspoken connection that neither of them can acknowledge, at least not yet. The kind of connection that makes William's heart race when Jason brushes past him during training, or when their eyes meet across the mess hall. It's as if, for just a second, the world falls away, and all that's left is the two of them. But William knows better than to entertain the thought. This is the army, the place where emotion is a liability, where relationships, especially one like this, are forbidden. He knows the consequences. He knows that to act on it would be to jeopardize everything, his career, his reputation, and his future. Still, every night after lights out, when the barracks are quiet and the rest of the men are asleep, William lies awake in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts tangled in confusion. What if Jason felt the same way? What if it wasn't just him? What if there was a connection between them that couldn't be ignored? But then, he remembers the rules, the chains of duty, the very things that keep him from letting his mind wander too far. Jason is his superior. There's no room for anything other than respect between them. At least that's what William tells himself every time his thoughts start to wander. The truth is, though, that Jason's presence has been inescapable. It's as if his every move, every word, is etched into William's memory. It started with small moments. The way Jason would glance at him across the training yard, eyes sharp, calculating, never giving away anything. The way his voice would carry that unshakable authority, and how it seemed to resonate with William's every nerve. It was all so subtle, so silent, that William never noticed the shift until it was too late. He remembers one particular night, not long ago, when Jason had come to the barracks to check on the men. After a particularly grueling mission, William had been leaning against the wall, trying to calm his racing heart from the fight they'd just been through. When Jason had stepped into the room, his eyes had met William's for just a second, long enough for William to feel the pull between them, strong and undeniable. Jason's expression had been unreadable, but there was something in the way he held himself. A hesitation, perhaps? A crack in his perfect armor? William couldn't be sure. He tried to dismiss it, to chalk it up to the stress of the mission, but something lingered in the air after Jason left the room. It was almost like a question left unanswered, hanging between them like an invisible thread. Now, standing outside, the cool air biting into his skin, William is trying to shake the thoughts from his mind. It's impossible. He feels like he's stuck in a moment, caught between duty and desire, between what he's supposed to feel and what he can't stop feeling. He can't even remember the last time he had a good night's sleep. The thoughts of Jason, of the connection he sheer exists between them, are keeping him awake, keeping him on edge. Suddenly, a voice breaks through the stillness, low and controlled. "Private William," it says, cutting through the silence like a blade. William turns sharply, his heart skipping a beat. Standing there, illuminated by the pale moonlight, is Jason. He looks every bit the commanding officer, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable. But there's something else, something more in the way he stands there, something that makes William's chest tighten. "Get some rest, Private," Jason says, his voice firm, but with a hint of something else that William can't quite place. William nods, unable to speak. He watches as Jason walks away, the sound of his boots fading into the distance. But as the footsteps fade, the questions in William's mind remain. What is it about Jason that draws him in? What is it about their unspoken moments that feel like they mean more than they should? The night stretches on, and the questions only grow louder in William's mind. But as the darkness settles around him, one thing becomes clear: nothing will ever be the same again. Every time they trained together, every time they exchanged a glance or a brief word, William felt it. The pull, the tension. Jason's gaze would flicker over him. Just a flash, but it was enough. It left William wondering if Jason was fighting the same battle inside himself. What was it about William that caused Jason's eyes to linger just a little too long? What was it about William that made Jason's hands shake ever so slightly when they touched during training, or when their paths crossed in the mess hall? These questions haunted William in the quiet moments of the night. And now, with Jason's voice still echoing in his ears, those questions feel louder, more pressing than ever. What happens when the line between duty and desire blurs? What happens when the two of them are forced to confront what they've been trying to deny? William turns, his boots scraping the gravel as he walks back toward the barracks, the door swinging open in front of him. Inside, the dim light of the night shift flickers, casting long shadows across the room. The men are mostly asleep, but William can't seem to find rest. The thoughts won't leave him. The way Jason's eyes lingered on him, the quiet command in his voice that still echoes in William's mind. He tosses his jacket onto the cot and sits down heavily, running his hands through his hair. His heart is still pounding in his chest, and he can't shake the feeling that everything is about to change. He tries to close his eyes, but every time he does, all he sees is Jason, Jason's eyes, his smile, his presence that fills the room even when he's not there. The truth is, William is scared of what he feels, scared of what might happen if they give in to it. But at the same time, there's a part of him that wants to take the leap, to step into the unknown and see where this path might lead, the uncertainty, the danger. It makes his heart race, but in a different way now. It's not the fear of the enemy, it's the fear of what might happen if they give in to the feelings they've been hiding for so long. And just as the thought settles in, he hears it again. The sound of boots outside the door, soft, deliberate steps, each one coming closer. He doesn't need to turn around to know who it is. He doesn't need to look to see Jason standing there, watching him, feeling the same pull between them that William can no longer deny. "Private." Jason's voice is softer this time, quieter. "You're still awake?" William stays silent for a long moment, unsure of how to answer. He can hear the sound of Jason's breathing, steady and calm, but there's something in it now. Something that makes William's pulse quicken. William's voice falters, and for a moment, the words seem to catch in his throat. "I can't sleep," he finally manages to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "Get some rest, William," Jason finally says, his voice steady. But there's a softness to it now that William hasn't heard before. The sound of Jason's footsteps as he turns to leave echoes in the room. But this time, William doesn't watch him go. He can't. Instead, he closes his eyes, feeling the lingering warmth of the moment settle deep inside him. It's the kind of moment that could change everything. He steps into the mess hall the following morning to find the usual buzz of chatter and movement. But there's something else, too. Something in the air, today. He doesn't know it yet, but that something has a name. Colonel Stevens. Stevens is the kind of officer who makes an impression. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that seem to see right through you. He's been stationed at the base for a while now, and while his reputation as a by-the-book leader is well known, there's something else that hangs in the air whenever he enters a room. A kind of quiet intensity, a presence that commands attention without ever asking for it. And for some reason, William can't seem to get away from him. He's tried to focus on the task at hand, on his training and his duties, but it's impossible to ignore the way Stevens watches him sometimes, the way his gaze lingers just a little too long, the subtle way his hand brushes against William's during briefings or training. It's nothing overt, nothing anyone could point to as anything more than professional respect. But William knows. He's not blind. He knows the look. And yet, Stevens never does anything about it. He never crosses the line. There's a cold professionalism to him that William can't quite read, but it's clear. Stevens has never acted on the attraction. Not that William could have let him. Even if he had, he couldn't afford it. The way Stevens had once looked at him, that night months ago, when William had been new to the base, Stevens had noticed him, just like he notices everyone. It had been after a particularly difficult training exercise, one where William had been pushed harder than usual. His arms had been sore, his mind exhausted, But when the others had left, Stevens had stayed behind. He'd walked over to William, his movement slow but deliberate. And then he'd said it, those words that have echoed in William's mind since. "You have potential, Private William, but you're holding something back. You've got to let it go, or you'll never be the soldier you're capable of being." At the time, William had just nodded, unsure of what Stevens really meant. But now, looking back, he's not so sure it was just about training. It was more than that. As the morning continues, William feels the weight of the situation settle in. He knows he has to focus. He knows he can't afford to let his mind wander. But it's hard when everything around him feels like it's pulling him in different directions. It's then that Jason appears. His presence is immediate, like a crackling electric current in the air. William watches him approach, his pulse quickening despite himself. The moment their eyes meet, something shifts between them. William is no longer thinking about Stevens, no longer worrying about the consequences of his actions. It's just him and Jason, standing in the midst of all the noise and the quiet space between them that no one else can touch. But the moment doesn't last long. Stevens notices the exchange, his sharp eyes narrowing just a fraction. He's always been observant, and William knows he can't hide anything from him. Not really. The tension is thick now, like the slow building of a storm on the horizon. Jason doesn't look away, though. He doesn't shy from the gaze that Stevens is directing at him, though William can feel the weight of it bearing down on them both. And in that moment, everything William has been trying to avoid, everything he's been trying to keep buried, comes rushing back. The past, the attraction, the rules, the consequences. He's caught in the middle, between the soldier he's supposed to be and the man he's trying not to be. Because in this world, in this place, love isn't just a weakness, it's a risk. It's the early hours of the morning when the news comes, a surprise mission, the kind that raises the pulse of every soldier at the base, the kind that means something big is on the horizon. William is just finishing up a quick breakfast when Jason strides into the mess hall, his uniform perfectly pressed, his face as unreadable as ever. He scans the room, eyes stopping briefly on William before moving on. But William feels it, the slight tension in Jason's gaze, the brief flicker of something unspoken between them. It's the look they've exchanged 1,000 times, the look that says everything and nothing all at once. Jason pulls William aside after breakfast, his voice low and urgent, the hint of something darker in his eyes. "Private William," he says, the formality of his words making William's stomach flip. "We've got a mission, big one. No time to waste. Stay focused, keep your head down, and follow orders. You understand?" William nods quickly, but the heat of Jason's gaze lingers on him, making his heart race. He swallows hard, trying to push the feelings down. But they're impossible to ignore now. The way Jason's hand brushes against his arm as they stand side by side, the heat of his breath, the brief fleeting touch that speaks louder than any words could. And that's when it happens. As they turn to leave the mess hall, William's thoughts still swirling in the whirlwind of emotions, he catches a glance from someone across the room, Lieutenant Harris. He's standing at the counter, eyes locked on William and Jason, his gaze sharp and calculating. For a split second, William feels a chill run down his spine. It's nothing overt, just the way Harris's eyes linger for a moment longer than they should. The tension between them escalates. William finds himself lingering in Jason's presence longer than necessary, unable to ignore the pull between them, even though every fiber of his being is telling him to stay focused, to remember the rules. But just as quickly as their connection seems to deepen, the weight of the situation crashes down harder. Their bodies are close in moments of strategy briefings, their voices hushed in tactical discussions. Each glance they exchange feels heavier than the last, and yet, neither of them speaks about it. They can't. The day of the mission arrives with a thunderous roar. The troops are already in formation, weapons at the ready, their faces steeled for whatever lies ahead. But the tension in the air isn't just about the mission, it's about the things they've been hiding. And William knows that if things go wrong, if they don't stay under the radar, everything will come crashing down. The truck rattles down the road, kicking up dust, as the soldiers prepare for the unknown. The mission is about to begin, but William can't shake the feeling that something else is already in motion. The sense of impending danger, the quiet tension, it's building. It's too much for him to ignore now. He has to know. He has to be sure that the person who's been watching them, Lieutenant Harris, hasn't pieced together what's been going on between him and Jason. The mission itself goes smoothly, at least at first. The team moves quickly and efficiently, their coordinated movements a testament to their years of training. But through it all, William can feel Harris's eyes on him. Later, when they regroup, Harris pulls William aside for a quiet conversation. The hum of their radio equipment fills the background as the lieutenant steps in close, his voice low but deliberate. "You and Jason," he says, his tone calm but filled with a strange edge. "You've been spending an awful lot of time together. You both have been quiet, more than usual." William's pulse spikes. His stomach tightens. This is it, the moment he's been dreading. "I'm not stupid, William," Harris continues, his voice still low, almost sympathetic. "I see the way you look at him. I see the way he looks at you, and I think you both know exactly what I'm talking about." William's heart is pounding now. Every second that ticks by feels like it's closing in on him. He tries to steady his breathing, to maintain control, but it's becoming impossible. "Don't worry," Harris says, leaning in closer, his voice dropping even further. "I won't say anything. Not yet anyway." But I'm watching you both. One wrong move, and it all comes crashing down. Are you sure you want to risk it? If Harris is seen through their facade, it's only a matter of time before everything is exposed. William swallows hard. You're wrong, he says, his voice hoarse. There's nothing between us. Harris simply nods, his eyes piercing. Keep it that way, Private, for your sake. And his. The weight of Lieutenant Harris's words lingers long after he walks away. William stands frozen in place, his mind racing, heart pounding in his chest. The air around him feels thicker now, oppressive, like the atmosphere before a storm. He forces himself to move, to rejoin the team, but every step feels heavier. Harris had been too casual, too knowing. He hadn't threatened William outright, but the implication was clear as they continue with the mission. Every time William looks up, he feels like the lieutenant is there, his eyes on him like a hawk waiting for a sign, a misstep, a slip. He tries to push the paranoia aside, to focus on the task at hand, but it's hard to ignore the feeling that every word he speaks, every movement he makes is being scrutinized. The fear is consuming him. What if the whole base is starting to see the way Jason and he are connected, the way they move together in sync, as the team moves in, stealthily infiltrating the enemy's camp? The tension reaches its peak just as they approach the building where the intelligence is stored. William catches a glimpse of someone watching them. It's not Harris this time, but one of the other senior officers, Captain Daniels. He's standing near the edge of the camp, his eyes locked on William and Jason, and there's something unsettling in his gaze. It's not like Harris's suspicion, which had been quiet and indirect. Daniels's look is more knowing, more probing, and in that moment, William feels the pit in his stomach deepen. The mission is a success. The intelligence is secured, and the team makes their way back to base, but the ride back is anything but triumphant. When they return to base, there's a strange unease in the air. The mission is over, but the war for their secret is just beginning. The familiar buzz of activity at the base feels different now, as if the soldiers around him are whispering without speaking, as if every glance, every movement is loaded with suspicion. Jason pulls William aside in the barracks, his face tight with concern. We need to talk, he says, his voice low. Something's wrong. I can feel it. William nods, his throat tight. I know. I can't shake the feeling that someone knows, that someone's watching us. Jason's brow furrows, and he glances around them, making sure no one else is nearby. Harris. I thought it was him, but it's Daniels, William whispers, his voice barely audible. He was looking at us today, like he knows, like he's putting the pieces together. Jason's expression hardens, but there's a flicker of something darker in his eyes. This could get worse. If he knows, if anyone knows, we're done. As Jason pulls him closer, his eyes locked on William's, the weight of their situation presses down on them both. We need to be careful. Harris, Daniels, whoever it is, they're a threat, and the moment they make a move, we'll have to make ours. The air is heavy with tension as the soldiers prepare for another day of routine training, the morning sun casting long shadows over the barracks and the open fields where they drill. It feels like a typical day at the base, but there's something in the atmosphere, a quiet sense of anticipation, as if something is about to break. But then it happens. Through the base, followed by the unmistakable sound of gunfire. Chaos erupts in an instant. The soldiers spring into action, adrenaline surging through their veins as they scramble for their weapons and take cover. William's heart pounds in his chest as he instinctively reaches for his rifle. The base is under attack, the enemy is here, and the familiar feeling of controlled panic sets in. William's mind races as he pushes through the haze of confusion, moving swiftly but methodically toward the barracks to assess the situation. He moves toward the command center, where Jason should be. His thoughts scattered. The mission, the love, the fear, they all blur together in the urgency of the moment. He reaches the command center, and the door slams open, revealing Jason standing near a map, his expression hard but focused. But before William can say a word, the sound of an explosion rattles the walls, and dust falls from the ceiling. The building shakes, and William's instincts kick in. He grabs Jason by the arm and pulls him toward the nearest exit, his heart racing in his chest. The attack is more coordinated than they expected. Too precise, too deadly. Stay close, William hisses, urgency in his voice. We need to get to the perimeter and make sure the others are safe. Jason's eyes meet his, and for a fleeting moment, everything else falls away. There's no more hiding, no more pretending. In the heat of the moment, with the sounds of battle surrounding them, William sees the truth in Jason's eyes, the same truth he's been fighting to deny. They move swiftly through the base, their movements synchronized, each step calculated. But as they round a corner, they come face to face with an enemy soldier. The soldier is already raising his weapon, and in a split second, William reacts. His training kicks in as he tackles the soldier to the ground, knocking the rifle out of his hands. The two men struggle on the ground, fists flying, the noise of the attack almost drowned out by the pounding of William's heart. Through the haze of chaos, William hears Jason shout. He turns just in time to see another soldier rushing toward him, and without thinking, Jason moves to intercept. In one fluid motion, Jason tackles the soldier, his body a shield between the enemy and William. The soldier struggles trying to push Jason off, but Jason doesn't give an inch. The fight is brutal, but Jason's training and strength win out. He pins the enemy soldier down, taking the weapon from him before turning back to William, his face hard, but his eyes flickering with something deeper. For a moment, everything slows down. The weight of the situation, the life or death stakes, the enemy closing in on all sides, everything crashes down on them, and in that moment, William realizes something he's been trying to ignore for far too long. He's not just fighting to survive, he's fighting for Jason, for the connection they share, for the bond that has become undeniable, and Jason is fighting for him too. "Stay close," Jason says, his voice low but urgent. "We get through this together." The words hit William like a thunderclap, and for the first time, he allows himself to believe in the possibility of something more than just survival. As they continue through the chaos of the base, the ground shakes with the force of another explosion, and the enemy forces are closing in. But in the middle of it all, there's a sense of clarity between them. It's not just the mission anymore, it's about each other. As the battle rages on, William spots a group of enemy soldiers moving toward Jason. Without hesitation, he charges, throwing himself between Jason and the advancing soldiers. He tackles the first one to the ground, his fists landing in quick succession, each blow filled with the raw emotion he's been holding in. The enemy is relentless, but so are they. William doesn't care about the rules anymore. He doesn't care about the consequences. He cares only about the man standing next to him, the one who has captured his heart in ways he never thought possible. Finally, the last of the enemy forces retreat, leaving the base in a temporary silence, broken only by the heavy breathing of the soldiers who survived. The sound of battle fades into the background as William and Jason stand there, side by side, covered in dirt and sweat, their eyes meeting in the aftermath. The danger has passed, for now, but the truth has been laid bare. Jason's hand reaches out, pulling William into a brief but desperate embrace. It's not just relief, it's something deeper, something raw, as if they've both finally admitted what they've been too scared to say. "I don't care what happens," Jason says, his voice rough with emotion. "I will always protect you." William's heart swells with the weight of those words, his own feelings rising to the surface. "I know," he whispers. "I would do the same for you." Their love has been tested in the most extreme way, and they both come out on the other side, stronger and more certain than ever before. But in the quiet aftermath, as the smoke clears and the dust settles, one thing is undeniable. No matter what the future holds, William and Jason are no longer hiding. The battle has ended. William stands just outside the command center, staring at the horizon, his mind still racing with everything that's happened. The rush of adrenaline has faded, but the weight of the last few days still presses heavily on him. The base feels different now, more fragile, more exposed than it ever has before. He spots Jason in the distance, standing near the medical tents, his broad frame hard to miss amidst the bustle. Jason catches his eye from across the courtyard, his expression still stoic, but there's a softness there now, something that William has never seen in him before. William's heart skips a beat as he walks toward him, the distance between them shrinking with every step. Jason watches him approach, his lips pressing into a tight line before he speaks, his voice low but carrying the weight of everything they've been through. "You all right?" he asks, his eyes scanning William's face for any sign of injury, any sign of the toll the battle has taken. William nods, though his heart is still pounding. "I'm fine, just glad it's over." Jason gives a short nod, his hand moving instinctively toward William's arm, a gesture of comfort in the middle of everything. "I'm glad you're safe," Jason says, his voice thick with emotion. The words are simple, but they carry the weight of everything unspoken between them. William looks up at him, the world around them fading as everything feels sharper, clearer. "I couldn't have done it without you," William says, his voice hoarse. Jason's gaze softens, and for a moment, it's as if the rest of the world disappears. There's no army, no rank, no consequences. There's only the two of them, standing together in the aftermath of everything they've been through. "I don't know what's going to happen now," Jason admits, his words quiet but raw. "The army is not going to look kindly on us. On this," he gestures vaguely between them, the weight of his words hanging in the air. "It doesn't matter," he says, his voice firm with a conviction he hasn't felt before. "I'm done living in fear. You and me, we're more than just soldiers. We're this, and I'm not going to hide it anymore." "I've spent so much of my life hiding from this," Jason says, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I've spent my whole career keeping everything locked down, keeping everything separate. But with you, it's different. It feels real, and I can't keep pretending that it isn't." William reaches out, his hand resting lightly on Jason's arm, a silent promise passing between them. "You don't have to anymore. I don't want to hide anymore." For the first time in a long time, William feels at peace. William takes a deep breath and stands taller. "We might not be able to tell anyone, not yet, but we know the truth, Jason, and that's all that matters." Jason's jaw tightens, his hand reaching up to squeeze William's. "I'm with you, no matter what comes next. You and me, we face it together." Their love is still a secret, but it's no longer something to hide, it's something to fight for. And no matter what comes next, they will fight for it, together. As William turns to Jason, feeling the quiet weight of their shared promise, The sound of boots on the gravel catches his attention. He doesn't have to look up to know who it is. The commanding presence is unmistakable. The sound of Lieutenant Harris's steps, deliberate and heavy, is something William has learned to recognize all too well. Jason seems to stiffen beside him, a fleeting flicker of discomfort in his eyes as Harris approaches. William knows this moment is coming, but he doesn't feel the same rush of panic he would have in the past. Harris stops a few paces in front of them, his eyes sweeping over both men. He doesn't look angry or disappointed. Instead, there's a knowing in his eyes, a depth of understanding that William wasn't expecting. "I see it now," Harris says, his gaze flickering between William and Jason. "I should have seen it earlier." His words land with a weight, but there's no accusation in them. It's something more complicated than that. William's heart skips in his chest, unsure how to respond. He feels Jason's presence beside him, but Jason remains silent, his shoulders tense. "You've been careful," Harris continues, his voice steady, "but I could tell, the way you two look at each other. It's hard to miss." William takes a slow breath, the words he's been wanting to say for so long on the tip of his tongue, but he's not sure what to expect from Harris. Will this be the moment everything falls apart? But then, Harris surprises him. "Listen," Harris says, his tone shifting, a slight sigh escaping his lips. "I've been through the same thing myself, a long time ago." The revelation hits William like a jolt. Harris, the same lieutenant who has always been so by the book, so rigid in his role, had once been in the same position? For a split second, William wonders if it's a joke, some sort of test, but the sincerity in Harris's eyes tells him otherwise. "I'm not here to tear you down," Harris continues, his gaze softening. "I can see what this is, and I've seen the way you two look at each other. You don't have to hide it from me anymore." He pauses, letting the weight of his words sink in before continuing. "I know what it's like to be in your shoes, keeping a part of yourself locked away, pretending for the sake of the job. But that kind of living doesn't last. Not forever." He takes a step closer, his voice quieter now, more personal. "Love doesn't care about rank. It doesn't care about orders or protocol. I'm not saying this won't cause problems," Harris adds, his voice steady again, "but I'll keep your secret. I won't say anything about what's going on here, for you two." He looks directly at William, then at Jason, his expression unreadable for a moment. "But you need to be careful. People talk. It's not just the rules of the army, it's how people think, how they react when things like this happen." William nods slowly, feeling the weight of Harris's words. He feels the truth of what Harris is offering. Harris isn't approving, and he's not condoning it, but he's not condemning them either. Jason steps forward then, his voice measured, but firm. "We'll be careful, Lieutenant. We're not looking to cause trouble, but we won't hide anymore, not from anyone." Harris's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, William wonders if he's about to regret his decision to stay silent, but Harris simply nods, the faintest hint of a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "Good luck," Harris says, and then, unexpectedly, he turns and walks away, his footsteps fading into the background noise of the bass. "Do you think he'll really keep quiet?" William asks, still processing the exchange. Jason shrugs, his eyes locking with William's, an expression of resolve forming on his face. "Does it matter?" he asks quietly. "We've already made our choice. Now we live with it." William nods, feeling a warmth spread through him, a sense of peace he hasn't felt in a long time. He takes a step closer to Jason, his heart lighter than it's been in weeks, and without a word, Jason reaches out, pulling him into a quick, tight embrace. There's no audience, no orders to follow, no soldiers to command. There's only the two of them, standing in the quiet aftermath, knowing that whatever comes next. And in that moment, William realizes something powerful, that love really does conquer all. This is only the beginning. As the dust settles, and William and Jason stand together, facing an uncertain future, we're left with one final question. What would you do? If you were in William and Jason's shoes, would you risk everything? The career, the reputation, even your life, for the person you love? Or would you stay quiet, bury your feelings, and continue playing by the rules no matter the cost? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, and tell us what you think about their secret romance, their choices, and how you'd handle the situation if you were in their place. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, so you never miss another thrilling, heart-wrenching tale. Because in the world of love and duty, nothing is ever just black and white. Stay tuned for more stories like this.